But today I am excited to welcome all of you to our history talk, the Veterans Benefits in American History. And today you are lucky to have one of Program and Education's best digital educator, Kenna Howat Felix, who has been working in the Programs and Education Department at the museum, really behind the scenes on our digital resources. So Kenna earned her master's in applied history from George Mason University and previously worked as the historian for the Drug Enforcement Administration Museum and Visitor Center. As a digital educator at the museum here. She is working to expand the museum's digital resources, including articles, biographies, videos, timelines, podcasts, and more. And as a personal plug, if you haven't visited the museum's digital resource section, you really should. There's lots of great content that you might not have seen before, and I'll be sure to put the link into the chat. There's so much great stuff there that you might not have seen before. And so Kenna has over 10 years experience working in museums around the DC area. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kenna and let her tell you more about veterans benefits in American history.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks for that intro. As Jen said, my name is Kenna Howat Felix, and I am the digital educator at the National Museum of the United States Army. I want to thank you all for attending our Veterans Benefits History Talk today. And just as an aside, happy birthday to the U.S. Army. Today is the 248th birthday of the U.S. Army, so it's a great day to be talking about veterans benefits. Today's presentation examines the history of veterans benefits in the United States. While the progression of veterans benefits has not always been even throughout history, the United States of America has sought to care for its soldiers in gratitude for their service. These honors include memorials, remembrances, and celebrations alongside tangible benefits that improve the well-being of both the veterans and the nation they served. This talk will highlight the recognition bestowed upon veterans returning from conflicts, the measures undertaken by the United States to encourage future participation in the armed forces, how veterans benefits have expanded and adapted throughout American military history, and examples of how military service has helped pave the way for traditionally marginalized groups in American society to attain greater rights. So with that, I will move to the next slide here. The United States Veterans Benefits System extends back to before America existed as a country. In 1636, the Plymouth colony was at war with the Pequot Indians, and they passed a law mandating that injured soldiers receive lifetime assistance from the colony. The text of this law, which is displayed on the screen, states, "It is enacted by the court that if any shall be set forth as a soldier and shall return maimed, he shall be maintained competently by the country during his life." At times, soldiers' efforts to obtain benefits after their service have been hindered by civilian authorities. A prime example of this occurred during the American Revolution. Throughout the war, Congress, impeded by an inability to collect taxes, struggled to fund the Continental Army. Congress's chronic lack of funds fueled Continental Army officers' concerns that the legislative body would not keep its promised pension payments of half pay for life to officers, despite their wartime sacrifices. In March 1783, an anonymous address, later attributed to Major John Armstrong Jr., an aide-de-camp to Major General Horatio Gates, circulated among the Continental Army camp in Newburgh, New York. This address advocated for soldiers to refuse to fight if the American Revolution continued, or to refuse to disband if peace was declared until Congress acted on its promised payments. The letter was circulated along with an invitation to an officers' meeting on March 11th. General George Washington, recognizing the threat that this letter posed to both civilian authority and his leadership, postponed the proposed officers' meeting until March 15th. On March 15th, a group of around 100 Continental Army officers representing the various states gathered to discuss their grievances. Much to the officers' surprise, George Washington attended the meeting, and his personal plea to those assembled stopped the potential threat against Congress. A portion of Washington's address to the officers is on your screen. Washington stated, "Let me entreat you, gentlemen, on your part, not to take any measures which, viewed in the calm light of reason, will lessen the dignity and sully the glory you have hitherto maintained. Let me request you to rely on the plighted faith of your country and place a full confidence in the purity of the intentions of Congress. With the crisis averted, Congress agreed to a compromise that provided Continental Army officers 5 years of full pay instead of a lifetime pension at half pay. Throughout American history, the nation has honored its veterans not just through tangible benefits like pensions, but also through acts of remembrance and commemoration. This includes the creation of Arlington National Cemetery. Once the property of Mary Custis Lee, wife of Confederate General Robert E. Lee, the first military burial to take place on the estate occurred on May 13, 1864, for Private William Christman. On June 15, 1864, 159 years ago tomorrow, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton approved Quartermaster General Montgomery Meade's suggestion to create a new national cemetery from 200 acres of the Arlington property. On June 17th, the National Republican, a Washington, D.C. newspaper, noted that the powers that be have induced to appropriate 200 acres immediately around the house of General Lee of Arlington Heights for the burial of soldiers dying in the army hospitals of this city. The people of the entire nation will one day, not very far distant, heartily thank the initiators of this movement. Today, Arlington Cemetery encompasses over 600 acres and is the resting place for around 400,000 veterans and their eligible dependents, representing every major conflict fought by the United States. Now, I'm going to show you two separate Civil War pension applications. I've edited the pages to make them easier to read, but I know it might still be difficult. But take a moment to read through these 2 pages and then put in the chat what we can learn from the information provided. So the first one that I have on the screen here is the pension application for Rosina Lawson, and I'll give you a few minutes to look over that. And the next one is the pension application for Sarah Holland. Again, I'll give you a few minutes to look at it. So what you can see here is that Rosina Lawson, the first pension application, she was a widow of a deceased Civil War soldier. He was a private, and he was from Pennsylvania. Both of these women are from Pennsylvania. So Sarah Holland, she was the mother of a deceased captain. So you can see that they are related to 2 different ranks. Now, Rosina, who is married to the private, got a pension of $8 a month, while Sarah, the mother of a captain, received $20 per month. So you can see that rank really affects the pensions that are in place here. So I'd like you to keep this information in mind as we talk a little bit more about the post-Civil War aftermath. The Civil War not only led to the creation of Arlington National Cemetery, as I just mentioned, but the conflict scope also prompted the development of what has been called the world's largest and most generously funded social insurance scheme of its time. In 1860, around 11,284 people received pensions from the federal government, with approximately $1 million in benefits dispersed per year. These numbers expanded to 325,000 people and $36 million by 1885. The pension office staff correspondingly enlarged from 72 people in 1859 to 1,500 employees in 1885. As these numbers demonstrate, the Civil War marked a watershed moment in the history of veterans benefits that significantly expanded the federal government's pension program. Civil War era veterans benefits originated with the General Pension Act of 1862, described at the time as the most liberal pension law ever enacted by this government. This act established a disability pension system that covered Union Civil War veterans who had served since March 4, 1861, and whose injury or death could be connected to their military service. Under the act, pensions were distributed based on rank and the severity of the disability. Depending on the situation, claimants could include Civil War soldiers or veterans, widows, orphans under 16 years of age, dependent mothers, or dependent sisters under 16 years of age. The Civil War pensions became more generous over time through legislative changes that increased eligibility and the rates of disbursements. For example, initially, Civil War pensions were linked to service-related disabilities and deaths. However, Under the Disability Pension Act of 1890, any Union Army veteran who had served for 90 days and had been honorably discharged, regardless of whether he had experienced combat, was eligible for a pension if he had a disability that prevented him from doing manual labor. This stipulation included non-service related disabilities like old age. In effect, the Civil War pension system grew from one that provided compensation for combat-related deaths or disabilities to an old age and disability benefit system. In a similar manner, eligibility for Civil War pensions eventually expanded to potentially include dependent brothers under the age of 16 and fathers. To put the federal government's post-Civil War pension system into perspective, from 1880 to 1910, more than 40% of the government's expenditures went to pension payments, further highlighting the significant impact that the Civil War had on the growth of veterans' benefits. Now, as we transition to discussing another development in the history of veterans' benefits, I'd like you to take a close look at the image on the screen. What stands out to you about this image? Does anyone know what this image represents? So this is Uncle Sam. You probably could tell that. He is standing over a grave with a wreath on it. This image was created by cartoonist Clifford Berryman as a Memorial Day tribute in 1928, but the holiday's history stretches back further to the Civil War. As Americans across the nation grappled with the Civil War's death and destruction, the war's aftermath led to the creation of a new day to honor the conflict's fallen, Memorial Day, also known as Decoration Day. Many places from Richmond, Virginia to Boalsburg, Pennsylvania have laid claim to the title Memorial Day's birthplace. However, in 1966, the federal government officially recognized Waterloo, New York as the birthplace of Memorial Day. Waterloo held its first Decoration Day celebration on May 5th, 1866. 2 years later, Major General John A. Logan, head of the Grand Army of the Republic, is attributed with organizing Memorial Day's first national celebration. In his General Orders No. 11, given to Union Army veterans of the Grand Army of the Republic on May 5th, 1868, Logan called for a National Day of Remembrance, declaring, "The 30th of May, 1868, is designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in defense of their country during the late rebellion, and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land. Let no vandalism of avarice or neglect, no ravages of time testify to the present or to the coming generations that we have forgotten as a people the cost of a free and undivided republic." He goes on to say that this day is not about remembering and honoring, he goes on to say that this day is about remembering and honoring not only the service members who died, but also those they left behind. Let us then gather around their sacred remains and garland the passionless mounds above them with choicest flowers of springtime. Let us raise above them the dear old flag they saved from dishonor. Let us, in this solemn presence, renew our pledges to aid and assist those whom they have left among us as sacred charges upon the nation's gratitude, the soldiers and sailors, widow and orphan. As seen in the large pension contributions from the federal government in the wake of the Civil War, Logan wants to ensure that those who served and their families are taken care of after the war. These pensions continued to evolve into the 20th century. After World War I, Memorial Day celebrations remembered soldiers who died for their country in all of America's conflicts, not just the Civil War. As part of the Uniform Holiday Bill of 1968, Congress declared Memorial Day a federal holiday to be commemorated on the last Monday in May, with the change taking effect in 1971. Across the nation, Memorial Day observances include parades, ceremonies, decorating soldiers' graves with flowers or small American flags, such as at Arlington National Cemetery that you can see on your screen here, and the National Moment of Remembrance, which takes place at 3 p.m. local time on Memorial Day. Now, a common theme in U.S. military history is that traditionally marginalized groups in American society have viewed military service as a pathway to full American citizenship and greater equality under the law. This is seen specifically in the service of Native Americans, Black Americans, and women. An example of this theme in action for Indigenous veterans is the Citizenship Act of 1919. Despite facing discrimination and a lack of democratic freedoms at home, around 12,000 Native soldiers served during World War I, which equates to about 25% of the Native male population at the time. Prior to World War I, however, approximately 1/3 of Indigenous people in the United States were not American citizens. The Citizenship Act of 1919 recognized American Indian service by granting World War I veterans the ability to apply for American citizenship. 5 years later, Congress approved legislation granting citizenship to all Native Americans. Now, I'm going to put up a series of photographs on the screen that are all related to women's service during World War I. Take a close look at these images. What stands out to you in these photographs? Any thoughts on what these images reveal about women's wartime service? I'm going to go through these images slowly for you. So is there anything you notice about all of these images? Now, during World War I, women served in the Navy, the Marines, and the Army. They were nurses, doctors, ambulance drivers, telephone operators, and served in other non-combat roles. The women telephone operators you see on your screen here were nicknamed the Hello Girls and served very close to the front lines. Equipped with gas masks and helmets, they worked long hours through aerial attacks and on occasion had to evacuate their posts. In fact, an estimated 25,000 American women served overseas in World War I. Additionally, women contributed to the American war effort on the home front in a variety of ways. They filled important agricultural and industrial positions vacated by men, conserving food, growing gardens, and buying war bonds. Similar to the Citizenship Act of 1919 that I just discussed, women's service during World War I bolstered arguments in favor of women's suffrage or the right to vote. In 1910, only 4 states had granted women the right to vote. However, women's wartime work galvanized the suffrage movement. Those in favor of women's suffrage argued that it was wrong to expect women to contribute to the war effort while not giving them full rights as American citizens. They also used women's wartime service to counter the assertion that women should not be able to vote because they made no sacrifices for the nation in war. Additionally, pro-suffrage supporters pointed out that the United States, a nation couching its role in World War I as advancing democracy, had fallen behind other countries in passing women's suffrage. Highlighting the connection between World War I and women's suffrage, President Woodrow Wilson remarked, "We have made partners of the women in this war. Shall we admit them only to a partnership of suffering and sacrifice and toil and not to a partnership of privilege and right? This war could not have been fought either by the nations engaged or by America if it had not been for the services of the women, services rendered in every sphere, not merely in the fields of effort in which we have been accustomed to see them work, but wherever men have worked and upon the very skirts and edges of the battle itself. The tasks of the women lie at the very heart of the war. And I know how much stronger that heart will be if you do this just thing and show our women that you trust them as much as you, in fact, and of necessity, depend upon them." On November 11th, 1918, an armistice ending hostilities in Western Europe was signed. In August 1920, the 19th Amendment guaranteeing women the right to vote was also signed into law, marking the culmination of decades of activism in favor of women's suffrage. Now, throughout American military history, numerous soldiers have given their lives in service to the nation. In ceremonies across the US, many of these soldiers are honored by name. However, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, located in Arlington National Cemetery, honors the unidentified soldiers who paid the ultimate price for their country. In 1920, Hamilton Fish Jr., a New York congressman and World War I veteran, introduced legislation to inter one unidentified American soldier who died in World War I at Arlington National Cemetery. This internment was meant to bring home the body of an unknown American warrior who in himself represents no section, creed, or race in the late war, and who typifies, moreover, the soul of America and the supreme sacrifice of her heroic dead. On November 11th, 1921, an unknown soldier was interred in a tomb built specifically for the occasion, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The video playing on the screen shows footage of the procession and ceremony from this interment. As the U.S. became involved in other conflicts during the 20th century, the number of unknown soldiers laid to rest in the tomb increased. In 1958, 2 unknowns, representing World War II and the Korean War respectively, were interred. In 1984, an unknown soldier symbolizing Vietnam was laid to rest in the tomb. At the time, this unknown was the only recovered set of American remains that had not been identified from the Vietnam War. In 1998, however, the Vietnam War unknown was identified as Air Force pilot First Lieutenant Michael Joseph Blassie, and his remains were relocated to Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery in St. Louis. The crypt that once held the Vietnam's unknown remains vacant. Instead, the crypt was rededicated in 1999 to the memory of missing Vietnam servicemen, and an inscription on the crypt cover reads, "Honoring and keeping faith with America's missing servicemen, 1958 to 1975. Since 1926, soldiers have stood watch on the tomb, and since 1948, the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, known as the Old Guard, has had the honor of guarding the unknowns. On July 21st, 1930, President Herbert Hoover signed Executive Order S-398, creating the Veterans Administration. The new administration consolidated existing veterans programs, specifically the Bureau of Pensions, the National Homes, and the Veterans Bureau, into one organization. This consolidation was intended to streamline veterans' access to benefits and reduce waste. In 1989, the Veterans Administration achieved cabinet-level status and was renamed the Department of Veterans Affairs. The department is committed to fulfilling President Abraham Lincoln's promise to care for those who have served in our nation's military and for their families, caregivers, and survivors. To fulfill this mission today, the VA encompasses 3 administrations: the Veterans Health Administration, the Veterans Benefits Administration, and the National Cemetery Administration. Collectively, the VA oversees benefit programs for veterans and their dependents, including education, disability compensation, burial benefits, healthcare, pensions, home loans, life insurance, and vocational training. Now, throughout American military history, veterans and their families have advocated for better benefits. Perhaps the most notorious example of this fight is the Bonus Army of 1932. As soldiers returned home after World War I, many did not share in the same economic prosperity as civilian war workers whose pay had increased an average of 200 to 300% during the conflict, and some veterans were unable to reclaim their former jobs. The World War Adjusted Compensation Act of 1924, also known as the Bonus Act, was intended to address this disparity between civilian and military pay. In general, the law provided $1 per day for veterans who served on the home front and $1.25 per day for veterans who served overseas. While the smaller bonuses under $50 were paid out immediately, most of the promised payments were deferred until 1945. Then came the Great Depression, with its historic levels of unemployment and poverty. In 1932, World War I veterans, some with their families, traveled to Washington, D.C. to convince Congress to pay the bonus immediately. These men came to be known as the Bonus Army, or the Bonus Expeditionary Forces. As Congress deliberated, the number of veterans camped in shanty towns and abandoned buildings in D.C. climbed to an estimated 20,000 or more people. While the House of Representatives voted to provide the bonuses early, the Senate voted down the bill. President Hoover had already indicated that he would veto any bonus bill that passed. So on July 28th, the police started evicting veterans and their families. Some of the veterans resisted expulsion. Under President Hoover's direction, Army troops, led by Major General Douglas MacArthur, with tear gas, bayonets, sabers, and tanks, forced the bonus veterans out of their camps and set fire to shacks and shanties. Images of the Bonus Army's eviction in newspapers and theater newsreels shocked Americans. Despite the veterans' initial failure, in 1936, Congress passed a law that enabled World War I veterans to claim their bonus. Now on the screen are a couple of pages from a booklet created jointly by the War Department and the Navy Department for returning soldiers from World War II called Going Back to Civilian Life. Take a minute to look more closely at the information given on these pages, and particularly in the general and basic requirements sections. Does anyone know what this part of the pamphlet is talking about? So this pamphlet is giving a general overview of the GI Bill and the benefits that come with the bill. Now, World War I veterans' struggles to obtain their post-war benefits and assimilate back into American society set the stage for another watershed moment in veterans' benefits history. On June 22nd, 1944, President Franklin Roosevelt signed the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, more popularly known as the GI Bill or the GI Bill of Rights. The GI Bill included three main provisions: unemployment assistance, education and training benefits, and loan guarantee for homes, farms, or businesses. Prior to the Act's passage, the Department of Labor had projected that 15 million servicemen and women would face unemployment after the war. With this bill, Congress hoped to avoid the post-World War I circumstances that led to the Bonus Army of 1932. Specifically, the GI Bill was intended to help World War II veterans readjust to civilian life and decrease the likelihood of a post-war economic downturn caused by increased unemployment. It was widely successful in meeting these metrics. Before the initial GI Bill expired in 1956, around 7.8 million veterans took advantage of the Act's education and training benefits, and approximately 4.3 million veterans obtained a home loan. However, staunch segregationists like Representative John E. Rankin of Mississippi designed the GI Bill to ensure that benefits dispersal rested in the hands of local Veterans Administration offices with little federal oversight. This local control enabled discriminatory practices against Black veterans, making it difficult for Black veterans to secure their full benefits, particularly when it comes to obtaining home loans. Congress has renewed the GI Bill multiple times since 1956, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. While Memorial Day honors soldiers who died in service to the United States, Veterans Day, celebrated on November 11th, honors America's veterans. Does anyone know why we celebrate Veterans Day on November 11th? What's special about that date? And no guesses today, but November 11th, 1918 marked the moment when hostilities ended between Germany and the Allied powers during World War I. Beginning in 1919, Americans celebrated Armistice Day on November 11th to honor the cessation of hostilities and America's World War I veterans. By 1954, though, millions of American soldiers had fought in World War II and the Korean War. Consequently, in 1954, President Dwight Eisenhower signed Public Law 380, which officially designated November 11th as Veterans Day. Renaming November 11th to Veterans Day extended recognition to U.S. veterans from all conflicts and acknowledged that World War I was not, in fact, the war to end all wars. The question, who is a veteran, is important to consider when examining the history of veterans' benefits. Much like veterans' benefits, the answer to this question has changed throughout American military history. In 1976, the U.S. Air Force heralded women's admittance into their flying program as, quote, the first time that the Air Force has allowed women to fly their aircraft. The narrative that women in the 1970s were serving as military pilots for the first time did not sit well with former members of the Women Air Force Service Pilots, also known as the WASPs. The WASPs flew domestic military operations for the Army Air Forces during World War II to free male pilots for overseas combat roles. On the screen is a part of a survey sent out in 1941 gauging women pilots' interest in ferrying airplanes during World War II. I'm going to read part of the survey description that's on the left side of your screen. A survey is being made to determine the feasibility of forming, under government auspices, an auxiliary organization of women pilots for the ferrying of certain categories of airplanes. No conclusions have been reached as to the future of such an organization, and it has not been determined whether it should be formed on a military or civilian basis, temporary or permanent. Now, additionally, one of the questions on the survey on the right side of your screen reads, would you be interested in joining an organization which is government sponsored at a salary not less than $150 per month to start? Based on what I just read and looking over the survey questions, what conclusion can we draw about the women pilot status in the U.S. Army? Their status is very much unsure. While a lot of these questions lean toward government service, it's still up in the air. So serving the military as civilian employees during World War II, women pilots ferried newly built airplanes from factories to military bases and other demarcation points, towed aerial targets for male pilots to practice firing at enemy planes with live fire, test piloted freshly repaired airplanes, and served as flight instructors, among other duties. In total, WASPs flew around 60 million miles, transported approximately 12,000 planes, and freed 1,102 male pilots for combat operations. 38 WASPs made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. However, throughout their service as civilian pilots, the WASPs believed that they would become an official part of the military. Despite militarization efforts, the WASPs were disbanded on December 20th, 1944, without military status or veterans benefits. After World War II ended, former WASPs actively campaigned for military status and to reclaim their role as America's first female military pilots. Finally, in 1977, Congress enacted the GI Improvement Bill, which, among other provisions, provided that service as a member of the Women's Air Force service pilots shall be considered active duty for the purposes of all laws administered by the Veterans Administration. More than 30 years after their service, this provision provided WASPs with veteran status, and it was an important step in honoring the women who have served their country in past conflicts. This same bill also granted veteran status to the Hello Girls of World War I that I mentioned earlier. Through the years, veteran benefits have expanded to address not only veterans' physical well-being, but also their mental health. In 1979, Congress, through the Veterans Health Care Amendments Act, created Vet Centers Readjustment Counseling to address Vietnam veterans' social and psychological needs through community-based counseling. The Vet Center's creation was an acknowledgement that some Vietnam veterans were having trouble reacclimating to civilian life. As President Jimmy Carter stated upon signing the bill into law, we also give special tribute to Vietnam-era veterans and demonstrate forcefully that this country has opened its eyes and its heart to their unique experience and sacrifice. Initially, only Vietnam veterans and their families could access the Vet Center programs. However, over time, Congress expanded eligibility to include veterans and current service members who have served on active military duty in any combat theater or area of hostility, among other avenues of eligibility. Today, vet centers provide eligible veterans and their families with individual, family, marriage, bereavement, employment, and readjustment counseling. Veterans benefits not only help soldiers readjust to civilian life, but the Army also uses them as a recruiting tool. To boost recruitment for an all-volunteer force in the wake of the Vietnam War, Congress passed the Veterans Educational Assistance Act of 1984, also known as the Montgomery GI Bill, after its major sponsor, Representative G.V. Montgomery. There are several components to the Montgomery GI Bill program. The Montgomery GI Bill Active Duty Chapter 30 offers veterans and service members 36 months of education and training benefits if they were honorably discharged and meet other education and service requirements. The service requirements may include entering active duty after June 30th, 1985, serving at least 2 years on active duty, depending on a soldier's contract, or serving 2 years of active duty and 4 years in the reserve. In exchange for this educational assistance, most eligible members must agree to have $1,200 deducted from their military pay. The Montgomery GI Bill Selected Reserve, Chapter 1606, provides 36 months of education and training benefits for members of the Selected Reserve who meet the eligibility requirements, such as having agreed to serve 6 years in the Selected Reserve after June 30th, 1985. The Montgomery GI Bill can help veterans and service members pay for college, vocational programs, apprenticeships, flight training, and other educational programs. Now, homeownership is a critical avenue in helping veterans acclimate to civilian life. The Home Loan Guarantee benefit for veterans originated with the 1944 GI Bill. The program's purpose was to assist veterans whose military service placed them at a disadvantage in building credit with establishing a home, business, or farm, thereby helping them readjust to civilian life. Over the years, Congress has amended the original program to address problems with its initial iteration and adapt to existing needs. Significant changes took place in 1992 with the Veteran Home Loan Program amendments. These amendments increased eligibility to include any member of the Selected Reserve or the National Guard who had served honorably for at least 6 years. Other amendments included enabling veterans to negotiate interest rates with lenders, creating a pilot program to offer direct housing loans to Native veterans living on trust lands, and implementing a 3-year test program for a VA guaranteed adjustable rate mortgage. In this way, the 1992 Veteran Home Loan Program amendments is another example of how veterans' benefits have changed over time to expand eligibility, address existing concerns, and meet current needs. As of 2020, 25 million families have taken advantage of the home loan program, including my own. In addition to benefits previously discussed, veterans also receive assistance for medical conditions caused by their military service. An example of this is Gulf War illness. Gulf War illness, or GWI, encompasses a range of medically unexplained chronic symptoms, including headaches, insomnia, dizziness, joint pain, diarrhea, fatigue, and memory loss. An estimated 1/4 to 1/3 of soldiers deployed during the Persian Gulf War developed these and other symptoms after the conflict. For years, researchers have searched for GWI's root cause. A recent study lends credence to the idea that the illness was caused by soldiers' exposure to low-level sarin gas after aerial bombings of Iraqi chemical weapons storage sites. The VA and Congress have extended several benefits to Gulf War veterans living with GWI. These include medical benefits, disability compensation, survivors' benefits, and the Gulf War Registry health exam. Through this free physical examination, veterans can voluntarily disclose their medical history and any service-related exposures to environmental hazards and receive, if necessary, laboratory tests. Veterans' participation can raise awareness of any potential long-term health problems associated with their military service and helps the VA better understand and address their health concerns. As the Army adapts and modernizes to meet the realities of a changing world, Congress has also updated veterans' benefits to address veterans' changing needs. For example, the post-9/11 GI Bill modernized veterans' educational benefits by providing money for tuition and fees, housing, and school supplies. The latter two categories were not covered under the Montgomery GI Bill discussed earlier. Soldiers who were on active duty after September 10th, 2001 qualify for the educational benefits if they served for at least 90 days with an honorable discharge, or received a Purple Heart and were honorably discharged, or served for at least 30 days continuously before being honorably discharged with a service-related disability. In general, the post-9/11 GI Bill offers up to 36 months of education benefits. To receive the maximum basic benefits provided by the post-9/11 GI Bill, eligible service members must have served at least 36 months on active duty or 30 days continuously of active duty before being honorably discharged with a service-related disability after September 10th, 2001. For the first time, soldiers on active duty or in the Selected Reserve who have served more than 6 years also had the option to transfer their educational assistance to their spouse or children upon agreeing to serve 4 more years. So with that, I want to thank you for attending our talk on the history of veterans benefits. Hopefully through this program, you were able to learn more about the various benefits, both tangible and intangible, that American veterans have received throughout American history, how veterans benefits have changed over the years to expand eligibility and adapt to current needs, and how veterans have leveraged their military service to both fight for greater benefits and greater rights as American citizens. Now, before we head over to questions, I do want to shout out 3 people who made this talk possible. That's Jonathan Curran, Jacob Henry, and Caitlin Catrona. The three of them put in a lot of work and effort on this project. Jake and John originated this talk in 2021, 2021, and Caitlin Catrona fixed it up and made it what it is today. So I really thank the three of them, who are no longer working here at the museum, but have gone off to bigger and better things. So we will now head over to questions.
All right. Thank you, Kenna, for such an interesting presentation that covered so much information in a short period of time. And so I guess I'll kick it off with questions, but for our audience, if you have questions, you can put them into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get started on answering some of those. The first question is that you included a lot of really great videos, images, and documents in this presentation. As an aside, the videos are my personal favorite. Where did you get all of these fabulous primary sources?
The vast majority of the primary sources, including the videos that were used, are from the National Archives. They have a lot of the pension records and a lot of military records and photos. Library of Congress also provided a good amount of the photos as well. So they're both very, very good resources.
Oh, great. Thank you. And so this presentation is a little bit pared down presentation of one of those that's on our website. How did you decide what points were going to be in this presentation?
So yes, as Jen just mentioned, this all comes from work that Jake and John, that I mentioned before, had put in a few years ago. They created an interactive timeline that I think Jen just put in the link to, so you can go visit their original timeline, which is extensive and it has many, many, many points, and it would be more information than I could cover in this talk right now. So I really pulled out the ones that are the most important, the ones that are the big highlights that a lot of people know. And then I included those ones that I personally find interesting, such as the ones on women's rights and Native American rights, that I think are also very important to the history of the Army and the history of the country in general.
Great, thank you. So we have a couple of questions about the Civil War, because everyone loves the Civil War. So for the veterans benefits that were bestowed on soldiers who fought during the Civil War, was it only to Union soldiers, or were Confederate veterans also given benefits?
Yes, the federal pensions were given only to Union veterans. And I believe every Confederate state actually did create their own state-specific pension program for veterans. I'd have to double check on that. But I do know that for Confederate soldiers, it was on a state-by-state basis. They were not included in that federal program.
All right, and then also during the Civil War, you mentioned that veterans receive benefits for old age. What made someone old? So they just decide, hey, I'm old, I deserve a pension, or was there a more formal process for that?
Yeah, it was kind of just raising your hand saying, hey, I'm old, give me a pension. But that had to be approved by a doctor. So they would go to either their town doctor, their local doctor, or a doctor that was approved by the pension office. And the doctor would examine them, see what their disability level was at, and then give them a pension based on that. Now, their disability level was specifically towards manual labor. I mean, if you think about the late 1800s, early 1900s, most of the work that was being done was manual labor. And so if they had a pension, if they had a disability that made it so that it was hard to do manual labor, that was considered a disability. It didn't take into account, desk work or anything like that. It was all tied back to manual labor. And so, of course, as you get older, it gets harder to do those sorts of things. And so that was what made them what made it an old age pension act, really.
Oh, fascinating. And so our last question is about this whole project in general. What aspect of your research did you find to be the most fascinating or interesting, or maybe surprised you?
So I think that's a tie between the Civil War pensions and women soldiers, women military members in World War I find particularly fascinating, and most people don't know that that happened. It's pretty much unknown that women served in the Navy and the Marines during World War I. And it's kind of a little quirk of the law that they were able to participate, because it just didn't say in the law women cannot be. It just said the service member. So that was really fascinating to me. And then all of their service is what led to the Suffrage Act in 1920. But the Civil War pensions are really fascinating to look at in terms of Social Security today, and how the country views Social Security. I mean, it took up 40% of the federal budget, and that is huge. So it's really fascinating to go back and look at all of those and see how that came about, and then see how it evolved over time.
Well, great. Well, thank you again so much for this presentation, which is so timely considering that today is the Army's birthday. So we are talking about something that is very near and dear to the Army's heart, which is its soldiers, the people who make up the Army.